Okay, this will be the reading of the Federalist number 14. And I told you it's a beautiful article. Most importantly, it challenges the Americans at that time. Says, don't suffer blind veneration for the past, whereas you're so blind that you don't know that we need to make changes for the future. That we need to do something because our world is going to be different. Encourages us to deliberate and decide after studying the situation. So it's just a beautiful one, and we'll just start reading it. It starts with, we have seen, excuse me, we have seen the necessity of the Union as our bulwark against foreign danger, as the conservator of peace among ourselves, as the guardian of our commerce and other common interests, as the only substitute for those military establishments which have subverted the liberties of the old world, and as the proper antidote for the diseases of faction which have proved fatal to other popular governments, and of which alarming symptoms have been betrayed by our own. All that remains within this branch of inquiry is to take notice of an objection that may be drawn from the great extent of country which the Union embraces. A few observations on this subject will be the more proper, as it is perceived that the adversaries of the new Constitution are availing themselves of a prevailing prejudice with regard to practicable sphere of Republican administration in order to supply by imaginary difficulties the want of those solid objections which they endeavor in vain to find. Okay, sorry, I read this just a little regular speed, but we'll break it down. The first long line is actually telling you what we've done, what Publius has done in the past 13 Federalist Papers. Okay, remember it says we have the necessity, we have seen the necessity of the Union as our bulwark against foreign danger. We showed you in a couple of articles how coming together and being united will be a good defense against foreign invasion, foreign countries attacking us, as the conservator of peace among ourselves, as a system which keeps peace among the states. When he says among ourselves, he's talking about the 13 states. As the guardian of our commerce and other common interests. Again, we talked about commerce in Federalist number 12 and economy, Federalist number 13, and other common interests and other things that is of interest to all of us. And as the only substitute of those military establishments which have subverted the liberties of the old world, and as the proper antidote for the diseases of faction. See, in number 8, it talks about military establishment. Why, when we unite, we won't have a standing army or a large standing army, and that would keep us freer. So that's what that line is for. And then 9 and 10, he's talking about faction and things along those lines. So here in half of this paragraph, he pretty much reviews the last 13 Federalist Papers. And now it says all that remains within this branch of our inquiry, the only thing that we need to now ask and find the answer to, is to take notice of an objection that may be drawn from the great extent of country which the Union embraces. So one of the things we want to look at now, one of the things that we hear our critics, people who criticize us and criticize this Constitution, they say this is too big of a landmass, this area, for it to be a republic. And he continues, a few observations on the subject will be the more proper, as it is perceived that the adversaries of the new Constitution are availing themselves of a prevailing prejudice with regard to the practicable sphere of Republican administration. So when he says, are availing themselves, those who criticize this Constitution, are availing themselves of a prevailing prejudice, a wrong way of looking at things that is pretty common amongst people. And he's talking about anti-federalists, as we have said, who say or follow the line of thinking on Montesquieu that a republic can only be in a small and homogeneous place. A very small place. How can you make this huge land into a republic? He says we have to answer these people who are stuck on this prejudiced view, on this narrow view that is very common amongst people. We have to be able to answer this, because that's one of our important challenges. So that's what this paragraph beautifully puts. He reviews the first 13 Federalists and then introduces us to what he's going to be talking about here. Now remember, in part 1 of Federalist 14, in that video, I said that he's going to talk about 6 things that he wants to bring to our attention in Federalist number 14. And one of them is actually the first one, the part that says American experiments rest on distinction between a republic and a democracy, and also the discovery of extended republic. So of these 6 parts, the first part is kind of divided into 2 small parts. We'll read them here in a minute. Just keep that in mind. If you missed the first part of Federalist 14, just take a listen and see what I say about those 6 parts. And one of the things that you can do, I showed you this website, teachingamericanhistory.org, as a resource. You can go there, and in the section where it covers the Federalist Papers, Gordon Lloyd has given a summary of every one of them. So those are helpful. I wanted to acknowledge that. I've already given his name and name of all the other scholars that I say. It's good to listen to their lectures and then read their stuff, read their books, read their articles. And you will actually find out that not all of them agree on the same, on things 100%. And that's what's good about it, is that we don't want to introduce you to people who agree with each other all the time. Okay, and don't question certain things. I don't like it that way, because I will try to let you know about people that maybe look at things differently, because I want you to look at different angles of the same thing. So just since we are short on time, let's repeat the last part of paragraph 1. So he says, a few observations on the subject will be the more proper, as it is perceived that the adversaries, the opposition, those who are against this new constitution, are availing themselves, are using the prevailing prejudice with regard to the practicable sphere of Republican administration. Practical sphere is an area where a Republican form of government will work. It's practical. It can work. In order to supply by imaginary difficulties, these are stuff that they are just imagining, and there's no foundation for it. Imaginary difficulties, the want of those solid objections which they endeavor in vain to find. They come up with these imaginary problems because they cannot find a solid argument, a good argument, one built on foundations that they can give you. So they come up with all these imaginary half-truths arguments, and they're wasting your time, and they are not letting us unite like we should and make our future better and the next generation's futures better.